So the question here is, why do we remember specifically good problems in stories? It all relates to the way our brain works, and we will see that it's very natural as a process and pretty common to every human being on Earth. What happens is that we have a working memory, and the working memory is a sort of time span of your memory for the last 20 seconds of what happened. And this working memory is always going forward. So every time you're actually saying like this is present, the 20 last seconds are your working memory trying to figure out what you're actually doing. What happens with the working memory, it's first limited in time, and secondly, it can only store 3, 4, 7 data points. It depends a little bit of the type of data you get. For instance, if I was giving you a phone number, that would probably be something you could remember if I was grouping the number 3 by 3, like 628, 618, 037. This is something you could remember. If I was giving 9 points, like 6, 2, 8, 6, 1, 8, and that was going in duration in time, you wouldn't be able to remember it. So we tend to group things in our working memory to make sense and store it somewhere else. What happens is that your working memory analyzes everything that happened in the last 20 seconds and try to plug it with things you already know. So, for instance, if you already forgot your keys, which happened to every single human being I know, or you got bored in a meeting, at one point you dropped, or eventually you reread 3 times a sentence in the report, with like this stuck rereading up until you figure out what it means, it's usually because the sentence is too long. And by the time you arrive at the end, your working memory tells you, well, I don't remember the beginning and I didn't plug that information to the rest of the things I know. So I didn't store it somewhere else. So basically you reread that sentence again and again and again. The working memory have these little kind of hooks that try to capture the information and plug it into your long-term memory and make sense of it. So if you can't make sense of something, what happens is that you drop your attention. And what we see in the way we build stories is that it works exactly the same. So let's say I'm starting the story with a great, good problem exposition. I'm telling something that people can relate. They can relate to the sector, they can relate to the field in question. We are talking, for instance, of climate change. We're talking about problems of low-income families. We're talking about the struggle of small companies. These are things you can relate to because you've read information before about that. You have some people you might know that are evolving in these fields. There's some previous understanding. So here I'm just establishing the context of we're going to talk about that. And that's something you can understand immediately. So if the work is well done in this first segment of the story, then you can say, okay, I'm going to evolve in this particular world. I understand it. In most movies, what happens is that you have a visual context of that. You're on a desertic planet. Okay, I get desert. I understand what we're talking about. It's gonna probably be a struggle of survival. Or if it's a love story, you start with the context of I'm in a big city and these people are pretty high income. They're like wealthy and they're gonna have this love story. So everything establishes the context. You already know that universe. You're not supposed to learn something new at that stage, just to relate it to things you already know. And then we go to the second segment, and you remember the working memory goes forward. So it always analyzes 20 seconds. And this time, the next step is going to be, I need to understand the struggle of the people we're talking about. I need to understand the struggle of a company if it's eventually, it's an organization or a company struggling. And so the working memory works a little bit like a zipper. If you go up for a zipper, you need to plug basically every single part of the zipper. And if it doesn't work, what happens? Well, the zipper completely unlock. You cannot close it, you cannot open it, it's stuck. So the working memory needs these blocks and these sequences to make sense of a story. If everything is validated in the first block, then it goes to the second block and say, okay, now I'm processing that. Okay, I got it. Clear. I'm going to the third block. When you're actually in this particular fluid, seamless sort of storytelling, what happens is that you're in defocused attention. Defocused attention means you're not paying attention to your own thoughts. You just go with the flow of the story. You don't get stuck, you don't get bored, you don't question your own understanding, you just go forward. And that's the perfect flow of a story. That's what happens when you're watching a movie, which is great. If it's a great movie or great series and you're actually binge watching this series, what happens is that you're constantly in the flow, you don't question the narrative, you're great, and 2 hours might pass and you don't even realize it. Or sometimes you read a book, a fiction book, and you might read for 3 or 4 hours and the world around you is evolving. People try to call your attention, but no, you're focused in a beautiful story and you don't think about yourself. You're just into the story. That's defocused attention. Now, let's analyze one usual type of problems I see in my scripts, in the scripts of my clients and the people who take this course. Let's read that sentence. In order to strengthen the identification of citizens with their region as a common living space and to encourage the creation of a society, young people need to be made aware of the importance of the civil society very early on. So that's a pretty common sentence I would read a lot as the first loaded block in the story in the brain of our people. So what happens in that case? If you look at that sentence, it has a lot of different sub-segments, sub-ideas, sub-logics, and your brain, your working memory is trying to make sense of all of this at the same time. And that's a lot. So if I put bullet points in that same paragraph, what happens? In order to strengthen the identification of citizens with, that's the first point, their region as a common living space, and I add something else, to encourage the creation of a society. Fourth point, young people need to be made aware of the importance of the civil society very, very early on. So here I have 4 up to 5 different ideas loaded in a little amount of time, my working memory, 20 seconds. And what happens is that I dropped. I have really a lot of trouble to process that first information. So if my story was going forward from there, what would happen? I would be stuck. Basically, I would be stuck wondering if I understood the context and if I'm actually qualified, if I can make sense of the rest. And when we are not sure we can make sense of something, we have kind of 2 different reactions. The first one is, I'm going to be super disciplined, it's going to be hard, but I'm going to try to reconnect with the story. I'm going to try to make sense of it. In fact, in most of the exercises I will give you, you will try to make that effort because I'm asking you to do it. So you're going to be in overdrive in your brain. It's going to be very tiring. You don't really get it, but you're trying to make the effort. The second reaction is mostly, okay, that's not for me. I don't get it. I'll probably come back later on the recording. If it's a webinar or a course, I'll make sense of that some other day. And this some other day never happens. We all know it. And so basically it's this reaction when you're feeling bored or you're feeling like, okay, not now. I'm going to check my emails. I'm going to check my phone. I'm going to do something else. So this sort of split makes it a barrier between the first segment and the second segment, because if you're still wondering what the first segment means, you're not gonna actually go onto the second segment, the moment where you empathize, and you're not gonna get onto the first segment, the third segment being in our story, the solution. What are we talking about? What was the solution to the challenge you exposed? And so basically your brain starts to be in a mode which is called focused attention. And focused attention, why is that so interesting? It's because you start to focus on your own self, on your own brain, on your own thoughts. And because you're doing that, you cannot focus at the same time on what the other person is saying. So you're kind of stuck in this mental loop of talking about yourself, thinking about yourself. And that's the common sort of mechanics we get when we start to think about, okay, I need to buy that as a supermarket later, or I need to still send that email, or my boss told me something, I need to do it. And instead of focusing on the actual presenter or the video you're watching or anything else, you start to think about yourself. If you're forced to be in a room like in a conference, well, you're gonna probably have half of the people in the audience thinking about something else, not following the actual speaker. And if you're not forced to do it, like watching a video and you have the choice of just dropping out, you will just cut the video and that's it. And same thing with a report, same thing with anything that is whether mandatory, you have to do it, then you will force yourself, it's going to be hard, or if it's not mandatory, you're just going to drop. And that's the main reason why people actually don't watch videos more than 15 or 20 seconds, because they can't make sense of the first block. They feel, okay, that's not for me. I can't make sense of that with the actual knowledge I have, so I'm just going to drop it. And that is the most common problem in video production when you see it from companies trying to put a lot of means, beautiful visuals, trying to produce something amazing, and actually no one watch it. You have like very few views, no one likes it, no one's comment it, and if you look at the metrics, the data behind it, you realize that most people dropped after 15 seconds. And that's also why you see on this myth on the internet that people only have a 15 seconds time span, attention span, and that's not true. Obviously, we are not turned into goldfishes like these little fishes in bowls swimming around. We don't have 15 seconds of attention span. What happens is that we are more likely to do something else, because we don't understand the beginning. And so in the end, what is recorded as data is that people drops before 15 seconds. So now what happens? Let's try to change that sentence from focused attention to defocused attention, something I can make sense about in this first block. So for our purpose, listen to that one. Young people often struggle to feel they are part of a society and a community. So think about it. Do you have any problem to understand that sentence? Young people, okay, they struggle to feel they are part of a society and a community. That one I can understand, I can relate to my even own experience while I was young. I didn't feel connected to the rest of society. I was connected mostly to my family and to my parents and to my friends, but not to the entire community of the city I was living in or the region I was living in. So this one doesn't actually say much, but it gives you the context of we're going to talk about young people in their relationship with society and their community. And if you look at the original sentence, we didn't say something inaccurate. We didn't say something which is simplistic. We said exactly what was in that sentence, but we focused the attention of people onto the right part. So now, paradoxically, they are in defocused attention. They don't think about themselves. They don't think about thinking. They're just like waiting for the next block. So what are you gonna tell me from there? I understand young people are disconnected from society and their community. What are you gonna tell me next? I'm gonna take two other examples. Children from low-income families often do not have access to public social services, while they have even more needs for them. Children from low-income families often do not have access to public social services, while they have even more needs for them. In that sentence, I already added a second little piece of information, which is we're not only gonna talk about children, but also from low-income families. So your brain is trying to make sense of, okay, we're talking about poorer families. What are their struggles? What does it mean? So what is the word I'm going to evolve in? And it makes sense. It's just slightly more advanced because we have two data points. So the next block of our story is going to have to come back on these low-income families. What does it mean to be a low-income family? But still, I get the context. We're going to talk about children in certain types of families which are not at the moment the most functional or getting the most possibilities out of society. Last one. Small companies based in the countryside often struggle to reach consumers, even when they produce excellent products. So small companies based in the countryside, this is one data point, often struggle to reach consumers, so they have problems to market their product or do something. I understand that, second data point. Even when they produce excellent products. Well, I can understand that. I can relate to someone who's doing a wonderful olive oil soap somewhere in the countryside or incredible jam or whatever they would sell, these companies. I understand that they might have trouble to access larger markets while their products are probably incredible. You don't even question that. Your brain absorbs it at very subconscious level. It's really easy to understand. And so that's defocused attention. You don't think about thinking. That's very intuitive. If you read Daniel Kahneman in Neuroscience, for instance, in behavioral psychology, you would feel that in system one. System one meaning it's intuitive, you absorb it, you don't have to struggle to understand that. While the first sentence, in order to strengthen the identification of citizens with their region, blah, 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 this one was very system two. That's a difference I make just for people who follow a little bit more behavioral science and Daniel Kahneman. I'll put some references afterwards. If you're very interested in what the problem definition is, so that's the actual terminology we use scientifically. So how will you define a problem in the head of someone else, how that person treat that problems. There are a number of zones which are activated at the same time. I'm not going to extend that because first I don't have the competence myself, but as well you can dig into the resources I put. Basically it happens simultaneously at different places in the brain, and the brain tries to connect the information it just heard with something happening. So that's like visualizing in your head the problem. I include a number of resources in everything I say, so you're gonna find these ones as well on the syllabus. And there's basically a TED talk on the working memory, which is amazing because it's very easy to absorb, very fast, great way to learn something. I also put you the academic papers if you're interested. So by fixing a good problem immediately in the mind of someone, what we do is we turn this person into a sort of problem-solving machine. Its brain is gonna try to figure out things by itself, And it's like completing a puzzle, everything kind of goes together. As long as the problem is clear and the logic of our story goes on, we don't have any moment where we get stuck, the viewer will keep following us until he makes sense of the entire project. And that's what we want. We want him to understand everything we've done. What happens in the following parts of the course is that we're going to watch a number of projects, complex projects, and we're going to try to understand what is the real problem they were tackling. So what I expect you to see is that your brain, if it's confused more than 10 seconds, will immediately drop. Your focus will drop. You will start to get bored, you will start to be confused, you will probably get both at the same time, and you will struggle to answer the question. There will be quizzes, you will be testing your knowledge, but what is important is that you notice your own reaction, because if you do, you will be able to prevent that reaction to happen in someone else when you write your own stories, when you produce a video, or when you create a web page. So talk to you soon for the exercises.